Europe's first fatality. A Chinese tourist dies from the coronavirus here in France. This as Beijing issues strict new self-quarantine directive for people returning from Chinese New Year holidays. The French President Emmanuel Macron tells the Munich Security Conference that the West is weakening, striking a similar tone to that of the German president. And clashes in Mexico City as hundreds of women express their outrage at the killing of a 25-year-old. 10 women are killed every single day there in Mexico. Welcome back to the France 24 newsroom in Paris. I'm Tom Burgess-Watson. Thank you for joining us. We're going to begin with the latest on the coronavirus. And the French health minister announced today that an 80-year-old Chinese tourist has died here in France, making this the first known death from the virus in Europe and the first outside of Asia. Well, until now, only 3 deaths have been recorded outside mainland China, with 1 in each of the Philippines, Hong Kong and Japan. Well, let's listen in now to what the French health minister Agnès Buzyn had to say.
I was informed yesterday evening of the death of an 80-year-old patient who'd been treated at Hospital Bichat since the 25th of January and who had a lung infection that stemmed from the coronavirus. It's the first death from the coronavirus outside of Asia and the first in Europe.
The French health minister speaking there. Well, hundreds of cases of the virus have been reported in more than 24 countries. On Friday, the health ministry in Egypt announced the first known case in the country, making that the first for the entire African continent. Well, the death toll from the coronavirus in China has now surpassed 1,500, and the total number of infections that are known about is more than 66,000. Well, the Chinese New Year holidays have been extended to prevent the further spread of the virus. And whilst many are working and studying from home, people are slowly returning to Beijing after an extended break. Well, the authorities there in the capital are ordering people returning from holiday to self-quarantine for 14 days. And there are warnings of severe punishments for those who don't respect that directive. France 24's Yena Li has this report.
It's a race against time to contain COVID-19 as the virus continues to kill. 143 people lost their lives on Friday in mainland China. The infection rate, meanwhile, dropped for the second day in a row after new methods of detection were put in place. For authorities, though, it's still too early to celebrate.
Currently, the epidemic situation in Hubei and the whole country is at its most critical moment, or in a state of stalemate confrontation. There is no room for us to relax, even a bit. Our top priority is to keep the epidemic under control.
In a sign of international cooperation, China is opening its doors to World Health Organization officials this weekend. A dozen foreign and a dozen Chinese experts will work together to investigate how the virus is spreading. Though the vast majority of cases are concentrated in the quarantine city of Wuhan, the Chinese capital too is now taking stricter measures. Beijing's Virus Prevention Working Group has warned that everyone entering the megacity should stay at home for 14 days. There had already been a loose self-quarantine policy before, but now if residents don't abide by the rules, they'd face punishment. Officials fear that COVID-19 could spread further as migrant workers return to their jobs in major cities after a prolonged Lunar New Year break.
Well, outside of China, the biggest cluster of coronavirus infections has been aboard a cruise liner, which has been quarantined since its arrival in the Japanese port of Yokohama 12 days ago. Well, of its 3,500 passengers and crew, 285 have tested positive for the virus. Well, the US Embassy in Tokyo says it's going to send an aircraft to Japan to bring back the US passengers aboard that ship. But they're going to be subject to another 14 days of quarantine when they get home. The annual Munich Security Conference is currently underway. The summit was established back in 1963 by a former German army officer who took part in a failed attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler. Well, that meeting, which is attended by world leaders, generals and diplomats, has developed over the decades into a forum for the discussion of global security issues. Well, this year's edition kicked off on Friday with the German President, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, suggesting that the US is acting at the expense of its allies and that Washington rejects the idea of an international community. Well, speaking a little earlier on today, the French president seemed to echo those words.
There is indeed a weakening of the West. 15 years ago, we thought that our values were universal, that we would have a lasting dominance over the world, that we were dominant technologically, militarily. And when I look at us now on a 10 to 15-year time frame, we're going to be more and more shaken by other ideas and other values.
The French President Emmanuel Macron speaking there at the Munich Security Conference. Well, earlier I spoke to our chief foreign editor, Rob Parsons, and he told us more about what the French President Emmanuel Macron had to say there in Munich.
It's a view that reflects differences that have cropped up not just during this presidency of Donald Trump, but predates it to the days of Barack Obama as well. People feel in Europe that a rift is beginning to appear in the transatlantic alliance, that the United States is moving in a different direction, which has accelerated during the Donald Trump years, but didn't just appear in the Donald Trump years, as I was suggesting, was evident in the Obama years as well, when he suggested the United States should be shifting its focus away from Europe towards Asia. And the European response is to say, well, look, given that circumstance, we have to start thinking much more seriously about what we need to do for our collective defense, for instance, one of the issues that Emmanuel Macron has been talking about this morning, and also what the position of Europe should be. How do we take this project forward? How do we re-engage with the peoples of Europe and make sure that the faith in those values that he was talking about in that quote remains, and not just remains, but strengthens as well? And one of the interesting things that he alluded to there, which won't go down with everybody in Europe, I'm sure, is the idea of a core Europe that leads the rest of the European Union forward. A core Europe in which decisions are made not by the unanimous decision of the 27 countries that make up the European Union at present, but of those most committed leading countries, obviously France and Germany among them.
France 24's Rob Parsons speaking to me a little earlier on. Now, UEFA has slapped a ban on the English Premier League champions Manchester City for what the football governing body said were serious breaches of spending rules and for failure to cooperate with a probe into their finances. Well, for the next 2 seasons, Man City is going to be barred from playing in the Champions League. France 24's Mario Sofos explains why the club has been punished so severely.
Slapped with a 2-year ban from European football as well as a €30 million fine. Manchester City, one of the world's wealthiest football clubs, are in chaos.
It is quite extraordinary. It's a huge, huge punishment being banned for a club like Manchester City. We've been the best club in England and in Europe for the last couple of seasons to be banned from any European competitions. No, obviously, the fine, a club like Manchester City can obviously face a fine of that amount, although it is a huge amount of money. But there are a lot of questions tonight about the future.
UEFA's announcement follows an investigation that was sparked by leaked internal correspondences showing that the team overstated sponsorship revenue in a bid to comply with regulations on financial fair play. The penalty imposed prevents City from playing in any European competition until the 2022-23 season. This includes the Champions League and the Europa League. It's likely to have a serious impact on the club's ability to sign new players and hold on to their manager, Pep Guardiola, whose contract expires next season. Manchester City have responded, calling UEFA's process flawed. They said they will appeal against the punishment through the Court of Arbitration for Sport.
Well, that brings us up to date with the world news. Remember, you can check out our website, france24.com, where you'll find all the news in English, French, Arabic and Spanish, including that top story there, the French Health Ministry announcing today that an 80-year-old Chinese tourist has died here in France, making this the first known death from the virus in Europe and the first outside of Asia. So that's the top story on our website, france24.com. Thanks for watching. Do stay tuned.